In today's fast-paced world, employers face a common challenge: employee stress and burnout. Keeping your team motivated and productive when their stress levels are high is a constant struggle. But there's a solution. Introducing Awaken Pittsburgh's Mindful Connections for Workplace Wellness series. Our program helps reduce stress and burnout, fostering healthier, happier workplaces. Transform your workplace culture and unleash your team's full potential with Awaken Pittsburgh. Reach out today for more information.
Hello friends, my name is Stephanie Romero and I am the founder and executive director of Awaken Pittsburgh. I want to welcome you to our podcast, The Ripple Effect. Awaken Pittsburgh is a nonprofit dedicated to fostering well-being, empathy, and compassion for all by teaching and encouraging mindfulness and meditation practices. I also want to take a moment to let you know that Awaken Pittsburgh offers many other opportunities for practice and connection. For example, you can join our online community, which features a space to more deeply explore the topics we cover with our guests. We have weekly posts to spark thought, practice, and reflection. I hope you will come join us to explore, connect with others, and deepen your practice. You can find out more at awakenpittsburgh.org. Welcome to the Ripple Effect podcast. I am really happy to be able to be talking to Christine Tapu today. Christine joins us from the beginning of a new chapter of her life. She is a lifelong learner and an educator who recently retired from Pittsburgh Public Schools, where she taught English to international students. Christine looks forward to contributing her expertise and skills to help students who want to learn English or other educators who want to teach English. She is the mother of two completely different children who keep her up to date on sports, statistics, social media trends, and new music. In addition to spending time on the meditation cushion, Christine enjoys walking Moose, the family's golden retriever, watching her son's football games, and catching up on all of the books she wants to read for pleasure over the years. Chris, I am excited to deepen our relationship through this conversation. You and I have known each other for how many years?
5 years.
Yeah, I think more than 30.
Well, I'm not putting numbers to it, but you were my neighbor in the first apartment I got out of undergrad, so we'll
Yeah.
just leave it at that.
Exactly, same. We had the same experience. That's right. So I'm excited to have this conversation, and it's also fun to know how our paths have kind of stayed connected over all of these years, and we've done similar things in our careers. And yeah, so this is going to be a really, really fun and special conversation for me. So thank you for taking the time to join me.
Thank you for inviting me.
So just because everyone that's listening doesn't know you as well as I do, I would love to just have you describe for us how you got started, particularly in education.
So as you mentioned, our paths have been fairly serendipitous in that we were doing many of the same things without even checking in with each other. It just kind of happened. So I am I'm in a new chapter of my life. I'm a retired Pittsburgh public school teacher, just very recently. So I spent more than 30 years in the public teaching realm in a classroom. And prior to that, I taught English English as a second language in various contexts. So I'm an educator. I'm a consummate educator, and still find myself pursuing opportunities to become an educator. like you.
How did you find your career? How did you get started in education?
So I was absolutely sure that I was not going to be an educator. I had a passion for languages. I had a passion for language learning, and I was interested in doing something internationally with my passion for language. But then it occurred to me that there are other people um, who have the same passion and the same interest, and I was drawn to inspire them. I taught French in Pittsburgh public schools initially, and I found that there were other kids who liked learning languages as much as I did. It was a novelty. It was fun. I found them, talking to each other in French with the words that they had. So it was by accident that I became a teacher, really. Um, but I stayed with it for 30 years because I found that it's something that I love. I love thinking about teaching. I love thinking about learning. I love learning myself.
Yeah,
So
that's
it's
awesome.
been a fit.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm just, how did you make the switch from, I'm just really curious because I don't even know this. How did you make the switch from French to ESL, English as a second language?
So it actually happened where I made the switch from ESL to French was the more is the way that it happened. So I went to school to learn how to teach English as a second language, and I thought I was just going to take the show on the road and be overseas. That was an opportunity that presented itself, but then I realized at some point I might want to just, have a start a life in the United States. So I decided as a backup plan, I would become certified to teach. And at the time, there was no certification in English as a second language in our state. So my fallback was becoming certified as a French teacher, and then later Spanish. And that became my bread and butter for about half of my career. And then the other half was devoted to teaching English as a second language. So it all fell into place for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, so much about your life and your travels and your career that we could dive into, but the topic today is more related to meditation and mindfulness. So maybe you could say a little bit about how yeah, how you first became aware of mindfulness and meditation, what drew you to it? What was that journey like for you?
Yeah, so that was I came to mindfulness in a moment of crisis, really. Um, I had been in Pittsburgh public schools at that point for a little more than half of my career, and I was overseeing a department. Um, and at the time, we had a good number. We had about 10 teachers, all focused on international students. We had probably 300 international students in our school. There was a lot of just a lot of activity, and I was the point person for the young people and for the adults. And there were some situations in the community at large, and then our school that had really touched the lives of our African students in particular. They were victims of violence in the community. They were victims of violence in our school, and it triggered me. Um, and being the point person for the department, I was still of the mindset that I was there to help and to fix and to facilitate. And when you're looking at systemic issues that are bigger than you, it becomes really, really hard. It was really hard for me. I felt like my head was in a vice grip. Um, I'd walk into the building fresh, and it's a new day, and I'm just going to take things one step at a time. And then as the day went on, the vice grip tightened. And it was really, really hard for me to separate myself from the role and from the experiences that the kids were having. So I was bringing that home. And I had young kids at the time, and I realized that I wasn't able to give myself to my kids and to my home and to my profession because of this vice grip that I had around my head, and I needed to do something, and I was truly, truly in crisis. And it's like an old professor used to say, it frogs if, and I don't even know if that's true, and I would never find out, but if you put a frog in water and you slowly turn up the heat and the heat boils, the frog doesn't notice that the temperature is getting hotter and hotter and hotter. They just kind of sit and think, I could take it, I could take it, I could take it, until they boil. That was where I was. And I ran into you at some point, just kind of serendipitously again, and you had talked about a project that you were getting ready to embark on, and that was care, cultivating awareness and resilience in education. And I attribute that to turning myself around, turning my career around, and honestly, probably avoiding a stroke, um, just because of the way that I was feeling under the pressure of um, of the work events. So, the purpose of care is to reduce stress and prevent burnout, and to consider compassion fatigue. And that was really the beginning of my journey with mindfulness. It was under duress.
Wow. I don't think I knew that whole story. So that's pretty amazing. And I will tell you that a lot of people come to practice through those moments of crisis, myself included, right? That is what often drives us to find something to help, right? And so you're not alone in that. And I'm so glad that it was helpful. So maybe you could talk a little bit about what that felt like, what that looked like for you, and how in ways that it helped, and what was your practice like at that time, just to kind of talk a little bit about why did it help? How did it help?
Sure. So I didn't have, I was barely surviving in life at that point, certainly not thriving. And I was really in a sink or swim situation, and most days I was sinking rather than swimming. So I don't even remember where I ran into you, but you had mentioned that you were working on this project, and you were bringing in Krista Turksma, and she was going to facilitate the workshops. And I thought, well, it's not going to hurt. And then you explained that there'd be other educators there and other caregivers, and it turned out that the majority of the people um, in the seminar, the course, were other educators, and some of the educators were people in the same school system as me. So it was really powerful for me to connect with other educators who had um, similar work experiences and similar bigger issues than them, to sit and hear what they were experiencing and know that I wasn't in this alone. Um, so that was really my introduction to mindfulness and to a practice, and it all began from that. It was my attempt to prevent, or to recognize my burnout and my level of stress, and just try and redeem, find myself again, and come to some level of being able to mentally deal with the things that were in my life.
Yeah, that was a great group actually. I remember it with like a lot of fondness because it was yeah, part of my path of starting Awaken, it was just before I kind of left teaching and decided to set up the nonprofit. And yeah, it was a really beautiful group. And I guess what you're saying too speaks so much to our need for communities of support, right? Especially in those times of crisis and difficulty. Like we really need a community that, yeah, like they're going through the same thing. They understand, they get us.
Yes, it's true.
Yeah.
So I had always, being surrounded by people in my work and being surrounded by adults and being surrounded by students, I was always inclined to work through things on my own because just having so many people around all the time, being alone it was refreshing, but at some point you can't help yourself out of the hole anymore, and you need the lifeline. The adage, you can't help other people until you help yourself, was certainly true in my circumstances.
Yeah, so we're kind of naming your personal journey and how practice and that community was a support for you and helped you deal with compassion fatigue and burnout, which, just to say, so many educators, as you know, so many educators share that, right?
True.
Yeah, it's so common in our profession. And I guess I want to understand, like, at what moment did you kind of understand, like, you could be bringing this into your classroom, you could be bringing this into your school? Like, how did that shift from something just personal you were doing to support yourself? How did that shift occur for you?
No, it was a very gradual shift. Had um, I had a respect for the practice, and I didn't feel that. Well, so I had a little, you know, perfection paralysis, right? I was afraid to bring it into my classroom myself because what if I do it wrong? Or, what if, all of the things that we're worried about as being, the sage on stage. Um, so I wasn't prepared to lead students myself at that point. But what did kind of bubble up with a different community of students that I was working with, um, in the refugee community at that time in Pittsburgh, was we were working with many Nepali speakers, who had been refugees out of Bhutan, and then they came to Pittsburgh. Um, and as we got to know the community, and as the community, became more comfortable with the school environment and the adults that they were working with, it became clear that they were a community in distress because of the amount of suicide that occurred in that particular population. When I first learned of that, we actually had, several adults from the community working with us to help serve the kids better, and they confirmed that that's absolutely true. Suicide was, endemic in the community. And when I did research, I learned that the resettlement agencies who worked with them called the Bhutanese the happy refugees. They were always very pleasant and always very nice, nice to work with. But then as we dug below and started talking to kids and started talking to adults and doing some research, we found out that there is the highest incidence of suicide in that particular group um, of refugees, both resettled and in their country. So the kids started talking about it. The kids talked about all of the suicides that they happened to witness and notice. And as we got to know the community better, um, there in a group, things happen in classroom discussions and in a discussion with students. Uh, it came up that, let's just say 12 out of 15 kids had been personally affected by suicide. They either witnessed it or have family members. So that to me spoke of something that needed some attention. And in that same time, a student who transferred schools was also, found dead, as a result of suicide. So the effect that those decisions had in the community, really brought out the need for some coping strategies and some coping techniques. So my principal at the time, referred me to the Thomas Brown Alton Foundation, which was a foundation that awarded money to prevent suicide, in communities, not necessarily kids. And we applied for the grant and got the grant. And through that, we were able to bring you in to work with a small group of kids in the school, um, and just, give them an outlet and give them, just a way to emotionally regulate and work through whatever they felt they needed to work with. And it was a small group, but it got me um, comfortable with the idea of working with kids, and the need to just let go of some of my need to feel like I'm perfect, and I'm good. I've mastered this. So your mentoring and your modeling was what I needed to see in a classroom.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that story, and of course have memories of being there with that group of kiddos. And if I remember correctly, I started working after school, and I think one of the school social workers was kind of co-facilitating with me with a group of refugee kids. But then I also came into your classroom,
Yes. Yeah.
and was working in directly in your classroom.
Correct.
Yeah, and that was, if I'm remembering correctly, there might have been two classes, like a Latino dominant class and then a Nepali speaking Bhutanese dominant class.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the students that you worked with me in my space were the Bhutanese, the Nepali speakers, and then with another colleague, um, you had begun working with a Spanish speaking population. Did I get that right?
I think so. I'm trying to remember if that's right or if it was two of your classes, but I don't remember the very beginning. I know that eventually we ended up in Leader to Me
Yes.
with
Kevin McNair.
Alexis.
Alexis.
Eventually, yeah, because we were in your school for quite a
Yes.
number
I
of
love it.
years, like I want to say 5 years, before there was kind of administration changes and things like that,
Correct.
and we didn't stay on. But I guess I would want to know, like, what do you think the impact of that work had on you and had on your classroom? And I think you named, like, you feeling a little bit more empowered to lead practices yourself, but I guess I would really love to hear, like, what was the shift for you as the teacher in the space, and what was the shift for kids?
So for me personally, well, so I think that looking at a community, having a facilitator, having somebody lead the work was important for me because it allowed me to be part of their community. I wasn't the person. They're used to seeing me as a teacher, the presenter, the person running the show, and I was a participant. So that was really important for kids to see me in that light. It was important for me to see myself in that light too. I was a practitioner, and as a practitioner who happened to be a teacher, um, I felt much more comfortable in that role. And you're right. You were in our school quite um, for quite a few projects, and I realized through the work that you were doing and through the work that I saw popping up around me that we were all working from our own sphere of influence, right? We were all building mindsets and offering services and offering practice, modeling practice for kids, for the people, for the kids and the community that we felt most comfortable with. Another colleague, Kevin McNair, you worked closely with him, and he did, amazing, impactful work with the people, in his sphere of influence. And Alexa, same. So, perhaps a little bit later in our conversation, I'll be able to mention that, and how I saw their work kind of dig into to our community as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, so for listeners, Kevin works with young people, and actually the group of kids that Kevin and I worked with Alexis were a group of kids that were labeled as not on track to graduate. And that meant a lot of different things for these young people. It meant maybe really poor attendance. It was juvenile justice interaction. It could be discipline issues, a whole variety of issues that young people had. And Kevin was mentoring quite a few of them, and we were co-facilitating a class for them. And I
His
will just,
organization is One Nation Mentoring, and he continues
yep,
to do really, really good
yep.
work in our school and the community.
Yeah, 100%. And one of the things that came out of, and Kevin and I continue to collaborate, and are still in relationship, but one of the things that came out of that work was I ended up training all of the mentors that he has in his organization in
Oh,
mindfulness, right?
beautiful.
Because they realized that the self-regulation piece, even though they were doing it with the kids, it wasn't as well developed as kind of what we were doing. And they were like, you're giving us, in fact, Brother Lloyd, one of the co-founders of One Nation with Kevin, said to me once when we were working together, you have given us the language to explain what we were already doing, but couldn't articulate.
That's
Right. So
beautiful.
they were naturally kind of modeling it and doing it, but now they had the language to actually concretely bring it to the kiddos. So thank you for naming that. Yeah. And if you want to say more about what you saw as the impact on the school of our collaboration with those folks and just their integration of mindfulness and meditation, like that would be great.
Yeah, so you actually gave the background to the incident, that the situation that I observed. In addition to my work with English language learners, I co-taught American-born students in American literature, 11th grade American literature, and so Kevin McNair had been working. You had probably been working with this group because they were probably one of your first groups. Some really dynamic but strong personalities in that group, and one day during lunch I walked into the main office, and at the counter in the main office I saw the head secretary standing up at the counter in full-blown argument and discussion with two of the kids that you and Kevin had probably mentored, and it was hot and it was heated, and I clearly walked into something that had been in progress for a while because the looks on all of their faces and the language and the gestures, and I just looked and listened, and I didn't know, I didn't want to interfere, but it was clearly not going in a very positive direction. So I looked at the two boys who I had a relationship with, and I said, you need to move away from this and sit down and just get your head together. And I motioned them to the chairs, and there were four chairs. There were two boys. I sat them in the chair. I sat down next to them, and I said, put your feet flat on the floor. I want you to sit up straight. I want you to put your hands on your lap, and I just want you to take a deep breath. And as soon as they heard that, and as soon as they did that, they knew exactly what to do. They got their heads right, and they sat there. The adult, sadly, was still behind the counter, just fuming. Didn't have the skills, and she honestly didn't know what had happened. In her head, I imagined her thinking, what happened here? Is she on my like? Is she supporting me, or is she supporting the kids? Like, what is she doing? Right? And I wasn't doing either. I was just de-escalating the situation, and the kids knew what to do. So the kids led the way, and it was absolutely beautiful. I was at the right place at the right time to work with kids who had already done the work and knew what to do.
Yeah. And that's the beautiful story that I hear time and time again from educators that I've worked with or other people in the community, families, parents. It's the same, right? Because in the moment, right, if you already know how to self-regulate using the practices in the moment, if you can cue it for the kids, nobody wants to feel rage like that, right? Nobody wants to have a bad outcome. Like the kids don't want to be suspended because they were in an adult's face. Like they don't want that outcome. They want to be able to advocate for themselves in a way that's effective, right? But they often lack the skills. And so when you cue it, it's just such a beautiful example of how when there's this ecosystem supporting self-regulation that kids step up, right?
Yes,
Kids
it
step
was
up.
amazing. It was amazing. That was your work, and that was Brother Kev's work, and it saved those kids a lot of headache.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. Thank you for sharing that story. And the other piece of that story, though, is there are adults in our school ecosystem that don't buy in, that don't practice, that even when offered practice are resistant, So, and we did find that in your school as well. So I don't know if there's anything you want to share about advocating for mindfulness in a school system where not everybody is buying in.
So the school district as a whole had brought on Dr. Kathy Flynn Somerville, and she oversaw mindfulness. Well, not just mindfulness, but socio emotional learning for the whole district. And her charge was to um, initiate mindfulness techniques in all of the school buildings. Um, and she did. She visited all of the buildings, and there are early adopters. There are you know um, people who never adopt practices, but she was instrumental in bringing this notion of mindfulness to all the schools in the city. Um, and it was rough because many of my older colleagues, many of the colleagues who started at when I started or before me, were of the mindset and of the school culture where you got to be tough and you got to yell, and the kids have to know that you're in charge. And it was a completely different mindset, and it was one that what served to escalate the tension. It did not resolve tension. And it was honestly the way that the school system had worked for decades. Um, so Dr. Flynn Somerville tried to undo that a bit and bring some alternatives. And there were some adopters and there were some non-adopters. And you can't force people to change mindsets, but what has shifted since her work is that I would say there are more teachers and more adults who are accustomed to the practice of mindfulness. Um, when you try to implement something en masse, it doesn't always work nicely, but people adopt at their own pace, they come to it in their own way. Um, we're blessed to have at the school from where I retired from a colleague who, she's a warrior. I mean, literally, she's a warrior. She was in the Army Reserves and would take leaves of absence from time to time to serve her duty. And she came back and trained us in something that the Army taught them. It was resilience training. And just the short version is, you've got to hunt the good stuff. So no matter what kind of situation you're in, looking for that good stuff is what keeps you, prevents burnout, prevents you from feeling defeated, from a lot of negative emotion. And that hunting the good stuff is nothing more than a gratitude practice. Right. So some people come to mindfulness through just finding gratitude, hunting the good stuff, finding the good things throughout their day rather than just dwelling on the negative. So that subtle mindset shift coming from whatever way it comes is the seed that needs to develop. So it doesn't always look like mindfulness. It looks like other practices that change mindsets and change demeanors and dispositions.
I love that idea of hunting for the good stuff. And I would say, yeah, that is a mindfulness practice, right?
It
It
absolutely
definitely
is.
is. And that's the conversations I get in with people all the time is I guess for me, a misunderstanding of what mindfulness and meditation are, because the general idea of mindfulness is paying attention to something on purpose in a way that is compassionate, non-judgmental, etc. And so shifting your mind away from judgment and negativity to look for the good intentionally, that is paying attention on purpose in the moment, right? And bringing compassion and, in this case, gratitude. So for me, that is definitely a practice. And if
And that
that's,
transform cultures. That
yes,
transforms whole
yes,
cultures. You're not
yeah,
always focused on the things in a system that are going wrong.
that's right.
You're finding things that, wow, this was good. This went right.
Yeah. And if we think about strengths-based approaches to working with kids that have challenges, like that's exactly what it is finding the good, finding the positive, finding the strengths that the kids have that we can nurture, instead of just focusing on whatever problem is there, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I also really, really relate to the gotta be tough kind of educator that you were describing. We encounter so many of them, and they are resistant. We were working with the chill project through AHN, and they were setting up chill rooms in schools, and one educator that I know, we were talking about the chill room in her school, and she was like, so they misbehave, and for misbehaving they get rewarded from getting able to leave the class and have a break, so why wouldn't they continue misbehaving, right? So that mindset that it has to be negative punishment and it's not actually skill building. So I don't know. Any thoughts on the shifting of that? And if you don't know, like the chill room is basically they're only allowed to stay there for a very brief moment. It's a self-regulation moment where they're given a tool, or just like you cued those people in the office, cued something to help them self-regulate so they can immediately re-enter the classroom and participate in a way that's not disruptive and, accessing education instead of whatever was going on before. But yeah,
Right.
anything that you have as a insight into that or recommendation?
So we had a chill room. I don't know who set it up for us, but we did have one, and I heard the same comment amongst my colleagues. Um, and I approached that from two different directions. One as a classroom educator, and then the other as somebody who understands the physiology of the science of mindfulness. Once you've blown your lid, once you've gotten your brain has gotten beyond the point of return, you need to get yourself together. And typically being in that same environment with the triggers is not going to help you to get yourself together. So teachers who expect, a kid to get themselves together in that same space that triggered them in the first place, be it the adult, be it another kid, be it, math problem number 12 on page 42, whatever it is that's triggering, until you can remove the student from that trigger, they're not going to get themselves together. So you don't have to subject yourself to that. You don't have to put them under the microscope while they're getting themselves together. Send them out and just give them some grace. Give them some grace and allow themselves to get themselves together. And there doesn't the whole notion of having consequences for actions. The consequence could be, you got yourself together. Good job. Now let's talk through that, right? And that keeps the teacher in control, right? It keeps the teacher as the locus of control in the classroom environment. They're sending the kid out to get themselves together, and they're initiating the conversation afterwards. As far as something punitive, I mean, what more do you want? The situation started, escalated, de-escalated, and then it's finished. That's a natural progression of an event and an emotion. So I don't believe that there needs to be something punitive unless something really dangerous came out of the situation. So it's a mindset shift.
I think you're right. It is a mindset shift, and it's really hard to help some people make that shift, right? It's really, really hard. Yeah, that's the work.
That's the work.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean, as a classroom educator, I always understood that when I referred a problem to another person to work through, I was relinquishing my own power. I
hmm
was relinquishing my own presence in the classroom to solve problems.
that's right.
Um, so by giving student a permission, or allowing a student to enter that space and to work with them to get to that space, you're still the locus of control. If that's important for you as an educator, you're still the person calling the shots, and you haven't relinquished any of your presence in the classroom. You're working with the kid to resolve the problem rather than doing to him.
Yeah, that's a great framing of that. A really, really great framing of that. I appreciate that. Yeah, so for the educators listening that are feeling a certain way about peace rooms, chill rooms, they're called a lot of different things, right? In different schools, or even certain kids with IEPs that have in their IEP that they get to leave if they get too stressed. Things like that. I've even heard educators make comments that felt like they didn't really approve of those kind of things, like trying to understand exactly what you said, that for self-regulation purposes, if you flip your lid, if you completely lose it, if you're completely dysregulated, you need help and support away from the trigger to regulate before you can re-engage. Yeah, really, really helpful. I guess the other question that I would really love to know is, what do you think your practice will look like now as you enter retirement? How are you imagining it fitting into your life now?
So now that I'm in this stage of my career, or life, um, it's a beautiful thing to wake up and to ease into your tea and ease into your day, and to sit quietly and listen to the birds right now outside because it's summer. And as I anticipate things will get busy and things will start moving a little more quickly. Um, I think I'll have the luxury of being able to find the time, and that's a blessing. When I was not blessed with that kind of time, one of the things that I learned, I think it may have come through care, or maybe I'm not sure where I got this little tip, but I tried to build in automatic times throughout the day for my busier self. And one of the things that came up a lot that I really, really used up until the time that I left the classroom was when I was on the computer and working on the computer, and the little like wheel of death, the little spot would come up. Rather than click, 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 and like let my head spiral out of control. Oh my gosh, I have to get all this done. I would just sit, and the technology was giving me my mindfulness moment. I would just sit and breathe through it, and then look up, and if the spot was still there, that meant I needed to breathe more, and if it went away, I would continue doing what I was doing. So there was this automatic reminder, like, just breathe, just breathe.
I love that. I love the little spinny wheel that is telling us to just take a moment and breathe. I love that.
Yes.
As
Yeah.
opposed to like,
Right.
ah! Awesome. That's so good. Well, Chris, was there anything else that you had in your mind that you wanted to share during this conversation that we didn't cover?
So there are two kind of references, or two things that have really um, changed the look of mindfulness. My experience with mindfulness has always been older white women, and that doesn't, or for yeah. So that was my introduction into mindfulness. But I've noticed that so JJ McCarthy is, I don't know if you know JJ McCarthy. He was the quarterback of the University of Michigan the year that they won the national championships. before he played the game, before he played any game, but that game in particular got lots of attention because he sat himself in front of the goalpost and meditated for a good 20 minutes to a half hour. And national television had him. They broadcast him and they kept on showing him. And in fact, they had it on the Jumbotron in the stadium. So my young athlete, I just kind of pointed at what was going on and, kind of pointed it out to him. And that has really changed his mindset about mindfulness. Like, it's not just for a certain group of people. Like, here's this top athlete, quarterback, who led his team to a national championship. He got his head right by meditating. And that was really cool. And the other resource that I really liked using with kids is a young man. His name is Timothy Scott Jr. He's his stage name is Just Me. He uses hip hop and he does meditation, mindfulness meditation. He's connected with the Center for Healthy Minds, and he does YouTube videos, and the kids really, really connect with him. It's a different face for a practice that we know and respect.
Well, those are two wonderful, wonderful resources for people to Google, and we will try to put some links in there in the notes for people to check out Timothy Scott Jr. and JJ McCarthy, whatever we can find about that. That sounds amazing, and I appreciate you naming that meditation has often entered spaces as a kind of white upper middle class phenomenon, but that actually it can be accessible to everyone. And the hope, with Awaken Pittsburgh, is that we're breaking down some of those barriers and working with folks that and using program delivers that hopefully people see themselves in the practice. Yeah, in the practice. That's awesome. Well, that's a fantastic way to end. Maybe do you want to have any last words? Anything else?
No, thank you for having me. I've enjoyed listening to all of your guests. So I hope our little tidbits, connect with some listeners.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, good seeing you too.
Yeah.
Say Something Studios.